This Houseplant Care 101 episode is for everybody that says that they can't keep houseplants alive. I can't tell you the number of conversations I have with people where it comes up in conversation that I have a YouTube channel about plants and I have like hundreds and hundreds of houseplants in my home, and the person says to me, well, I can't keep a plant alive to save my life. I can't even have them in my home. I kill succulents and cacti, like I just can't have them in my house. And the truth of the matter is that I used to feel exactly the same way. Literally anybody can be a successful plant parent. So this Houseplant Care 101 episode is going to be a short guide, and it covers all the high level things that you need to know that can be applied to most houseplants and help you find your green thumb. This Houseplant Care 101 series is sponsored by rePotme.com. With rePotme, you can have all of your houseplant supplies delivered right to your door. They are a one-stop shop for all of your houseplant, orchid, or succulent needs. They have custom handmade houseplant soils ranging from tropical houseplants, cactus and succulents, pothos, snake plants, and more. I cannot live without their clear slotted orchid pots. They have amazing houseplant fertilizers and so much more. I've included their link in my description below, and you can get 10% off any soil with my code Ashley. So my first tip would be realistic expectations. Now, integrating these beautiful plants into our homes is so rewarding, but don't be surprised if they don't always look perfect. That is totally normal. So picture this. You've got a vibrant plant, but after a few weeks you notice some browning leaves or drooping stems. It's not necessarily your fault. It's just part of the plant's natural cycle. You know, even experienced plant caretakers like myself deal with issues like brown leaves, pests, and the occasional loss of a plant. The key is to accept these imperfections and not get discouraged. Houseplants might not look exactly like they do in the wild due to our homes having completely different conditions than they do in their natural habitats. Pests are annoying, but they are manageable. And yes, sometimes despite our best efforts, a plant may not make it, and it's not a failure. It's all part of learning. So with all that said, why bother with houseplants? They bring nature indoors, they purify our air, they boost our mood. You know, my advice, just have those realistic expectations and try to enjoy the journey of plant care. Don't be too hard on yourself. I think people are so hard on themselves to be absolutely perfect with plants, and you know, that's just not the case, and that's just not realistic. So keep those plants in your home for a healthier and happier space. So if you decided to give it a go, you're going to give it another chance. What do? The first thing you do is have to go buy a plant. So this is what you need to do the next time you purchase a plant. First off, inspect the leaves. Look for really vibrant looking leaves and steer clear of any with brown spots or wilting edges. You know, happy leaves signal a happy and well cared for plant. So you may also want to take this time to examine the leaves for any pests. And when you bring the plant home, make sure to give those leaves a really good rinse off to ensure any unseen pests or eggs have been, you know, properly rinsed off and aren't coming into your home. Also check the roots if possible. You know, healthy roots are usually white or light brown. They have a firm texture. So if they appear mushy or discolored in any way, or if they like smell kind of funky or have like a bad smell, it's probably a sign of root rot. So I would advise not bringing that plant home. Choosing a healthy plant isn't just about aesthetics, it sets the foundation for a healthy plant. The next thing you'll want to keep in mind is lighting for your plant. Understanding your plant's lighting needs is paramount, however, it's not complicated. Different houseplants may have different light preferences. However, if you're unsure and it seems overwhelming, bright indirect light is always a safe bet. And basically this means close to a window, but without direct afternoon sunlight. You know, direct morning sunlight is usually okay because it's a little bit less intense, but the afternoon sunlight can burn the leaves. It's better to err on the side of caution and give more light rather than less light. So if you notice your plant is getting leggy or stretching towards the light, chances are it may need more. So I also recommend rotating your plant once a month or so to prevent one side becoming full and lush, you know, and the other side not so much, and it can kind of make a wobbly look to your plant. If you're concerned you don't have enough light in general, you don't have any big bright windows or anything like that, don't be afraid to use some supplemental lighting. There are so many great grow lights out there. There's a ton of options, and there are a variety of styles and prices, so don't be afraid to experiment and try out some supplemental lighting. Overwatering is one of the most common mistakes, and it's something I used to struggle with. Knowing your plant's specific water requirements help a lot. So as a general rule of thumb, many of these houseplants prefer to dry out about halfway to fully before waterings. So to check if it's time to water, you can stick your finger about an inch or two down into the soil. If it's dry, then it's probably time to give it some water. You can also use a moisture meter, which will tell you if there's still a lot of moisture in the soil. Another way to tell is if your plant has drooping or curling leaves, if the pot feels light when you pick it up. Now, the easiest way to prevent overwatering your soil, which basically means that the soil is just retaining too much moisture, is to just have a really good, well-draining soil mixture. For a lot of these tropical plants, that's exactly what they need. Always adjust your watering routine to your plant's specific needs, which most of the time can easily be found online. There's no wrong way to water your plants. I water a lot of my plants from the top. However, I do recommend bottom watering as well. And bottom watering is a plant care technique in which water is applied to the plants from the bottom rather than pouring it directly onto the soil surface. This method involves allowing the plant to absorb the water through its roots. So all you do is you take the plant, you fill your reservoir with water. It could be a saucer or a bowl, and then the water is absorbed up through the drainage holes and through the soil. It minimizes the risk of fungal diseases and water splashing on the leaves. This is great for plants that don't like to get their leaves wet or in containers where overwatering is a concern. As I mentioned, soil plays a crucial role in making sure we don't overwater our plants. Now, overwatering is less about how much water we're putting into the soil and more about how much water is being retained. So for a lot of our tropical plants, and as a general rule of thumb, I would say go with a very well draining soil mixture. Most tropical houseplants require a well-draining potting mix that holds some moisture but allows excess water to escape. When you purchase a plant, it's a good idea to at least check to see what type of soil it has. Over time, you will need to repot that plant. Now, you can easily make a quick soil mixture that will have optimal drainage for your houseplants. I recommend a 50% potting mix to retain the water and 50% either perlite, pumice, orchid bark, or a mixture of those to help promote drainage. Now, you can also find specialized mixes that are pre-made specific for your plants. Today I'll be using the Tropical Houseplant Potting Mix by rePotme.com. It's perfect for most houseplants, and they also have ones for cacti, succulents, and many other plant types. Always remember to match the soil to the plant. At some point you will need to repot your plant because repotting really is essential for that plant's health and long-term growth. So when you see your plant's roots outgrowing the pot, or you're watering your plant and the soil no longer retains any moisture, that's when it's a good time to repot. This typically happens every 1 to 2 years, so it's very simple. Just gently remove the plant from its pot. Take a look at the roots. It's a great time to see what's going on with the roots, and you can transplant it into a slightly larger container, about 1 to 2 inches, with a fresh potting mix. You don't have to take all of the existing soil off and, mess with the roots or anything like that if you don't feel comfortable doing that. That plant will be just fine in its new pot. Now, this gives your plant more space to grow and access new nutrients, and always make sure your plant has really good drainage, as this will help prevent your plant from becoming overwatered. If the pot you really like doesn't have drainage, use a nursery pot instead, and then place the nursery pot into the cover pot. That way, you still get to use the pot you really love, but the plant has the nursery pot, which meets all of its drainage requirements. I'm using my favorite clear slotted orchid pots from RepotMe, and they're amazing because I can keep an eye on the moisture, I can keep an eye on how the soil's looking, how the roots are looking, I can put it in as many cover pots as I want, and they have a ton of drainage as well. So it's very helpful if you have plants in your home to understand about humidity and airflow. You don't necessarily need to do anything, but at least you know it's a factor in your plant's health and growth. Humidity, or moisture in the air, is crucial for plants that originate from humid environments, unlike cacti and succulents, which originate from drier climates. So we do try to mimic the environment that the plant comes from, and there are certain things you can do to help bring up the humidity in your home if you need to. A lot of times plants will actually adapt to the new environment. So you may see those older leaves crisping up. A lot of that's from lack of humidity compared to the greenhouse where it was originally growing. And that is totally normal because you'll probably see those newer leaves don't have that crisping and that browning, and that's because they have adapted to the new environment. However, if you have very low humidity levels, then the plant may struggle a little bit during those very low humidity months, especially in the winter time. We see the humidity drops a lot, and if that's the case and you want to get a little humidifier to put near your plant, it would love that. You could also put some pebbles in a tray with some water, and that could help bring up the humidity a little bit. There are certain things you can do, however, it's not necessary, but I thought I would at least mention humidity just so you know that it's a factor when it comes to your plants' well-being. And if you're seeing crisping, at least you know what that's coming from, and there's a good chance that the newer leaves won't have the crisping problems. Now, if you're really wanting your plant to grow huge and get really massive leaves, humidity always helps with that. And an ideal humidity for your home for plant care is, I think it's like 65%, 60 to 65% humidity, which is very difficult to get depending on where you live. So it's not absolutely necessary, but it is a factor. Now, airflow can also play a factor in helping prevent bacteria and fungus from forming on the leaves of your plants. Now, this may not be an issue. I have a lot of plants in my downstairs area where there isn't like a fan going all the times and they don't struggle with it. But in my plant room, I've noticed that some of my plants here, if I don't have airflow, they get that bacteria and fungus, and it's probably because I have a lot of plants in here, the humidity is a little bit higher. So keep an eye out. And if you're seeing those spots on your leaves, it could be from lack of airflow, and it's just good to have in the back of your mind that you can just like turn on the fan, and maybe that will help the issue if you are seeing it happen. It's always a great idea to keep a houseplant fertilizer on hand. It's so important because it's providing your plants with the essential nutrients that it needs, that it normally in the wild would go and spread its roots out looking for, but because these plants are limited to their pots, it's really up to us to provide the essential nutrients. So different plants do have different feeding needs, and they do require more nutrients during their like active growing season. So if you have cacti and succulents, I do recommend using a cacti and succulent fertilizer. However, for most other houseplants, as long as you get something that says for houseplants, you should be good to go. Usually it's best to fertilize once or twice a month during the growing months. I always recommend starting in the spring and ending in the fall as the plants are going dormant usually, and start at a 50% strength in the spring and slowly introduce that fertilizer to your plants to see how they react. So the last subject I'll touch on is pest management. And although it's a pain, it's totally manageable. Again, to repeat myself, always check the plant at the store before you purchase it for any pests. You know, study those leaves and roots to ensure you don't see any pests or cobwebs. And when you bring them home, give the leaves a good rinse. And you can quarantine your plant for a couple weeks away from the other plants. This gives you some time for any pest issues to present themselves without spreading it to your other plants. So also, we're just regularly inspecting your plant for any signs of pests like aphids or mealybugs or spider mites. And the earlier you spot them, the easier they are to manage. You know, there are natural solutions like neem oil or insecticidal soap that can often do the trick. I love insecticidal soap. I use it all the time. Also, systemic granules are a lifesaver. And if you do notice that you have pests on your plant, make sure to isolate the infected plant away from your others to prevent pests from spreading. So there you have it. Just those few high-level things are enough foundation to make sure that you can thrive as a plant parent and find your green thumb. Again, don't get discouraged by past failures. Each one is a valuable learning experience, and keeping an eye on lighting, watering, soil, repotting, fertilizing, and pest management, you'll be well on your way to nurturing your inner green thumb. Again, a huge thank you to rePotme.com. I have included a link to all of their amazing plant products in my description below. I have many episodes that I've done in my Houseplant Care 101 series, and subscribe if you'd like to see future videos in your newsfeed, and we also have a wonderful community on Instagram. I hope you have a wonderful rest of the day and that I get to see you soon. Bye.